How's it going, everybody? Today what we're going to do is we're going to take this ratty old double axle boat trailer from the 70s. We're going to take it all apart, chop it all up, and turn it into a sawmill trailer. Let's get right into it.
My name's Dave Whipple, and you're watching Bush Radical. Stay tuned.
Now before we get started, let me bring you up to speed on what we're working with here. This is the dinosaur as I bought it. I'm going to have to guess this trailer weighed probably 2,500 to 3,500 pounds, and I'm going to guess it's from the late 70s, but I do know it had a 28-foot cabin cruiser boat on it, so it's super stout. Now, I've already taken 1,000 pounds of scrap metal off this trailer and taken it to the dump. Rollers and braces and winches, you name it. But this is what we're left with. We have a trailer that's got two sections of 20-foot long box channel, 3x5 box channel. And that's going to make for a very rigid trailer. When you're making sawmill trailers, that's the thing that you're really interested in, is the rigidity. You need a trailer that's not going to flex. So when you put a big log on it, it doesn't bow the trailer, bow the track of your sawmill, and bow all your boards. Now you can see here that I've kept a couple sets of rollers, and I've kept the braces that the rollers were attached to. We're going to chop all this junk up and reuse it. And of course, anything that can't be used is going to go to the scrapyard. You know, I think I'll just start making a pile right now. There's already stuff here that just needs to get out of the way before I step on it. Now, if you take a look at the way this is set up, the axles of this trailer are connected to this carriage that sticks out the sides. I'm going to chop a big chunk out of the middle of this carriage just because I need more box channel. And I'm going to cut that box channel in half to make C-channel. Now I'm also going to remove one axle because this doesn't need to be a dual axle trailer with just a little bit of nothing on it. So what I'm going to do is cut that section out of the middle and then scooch that carriage together, and then I'll reattach the top pieces. You can see here that I've slid it all together, and now I'm going to chop the top off of that, what's left of that beam that ran across the carriage. Now the trailer I'm going to build is about 42 inches wide. That's the way it's set up right now. So all of these sections of box channel, I'll mark them at 42, and then I'll cut them at 42. And then later on, we'll cut them in half. But for right now, what I need to do, I need to kind of get the tires dialed in on this thing. It came with 16-inch wheels, and the tires are, well, they're tall tires. And I want this mill as close to the ground as I can possibly get it. So my idea is I'm going to pull the tires that came with the mill off the rim. And I've got a set of low profile 16-inch tires out back that came off an old Pontiac I used to own. So we're going to do a little bit of tire work here in the yard. If you go to Harbor Freight, you can buy that bead breaker that I just used with a sledgehammer to break the tire loose. It's about 20 bucks. You can also buy these tire irons. A bead breaker and a set of tire irons is a fantastic thing to have around because it gives you the opportunity, it gives you the ability to change a tire by hand in your yard, just like rednecks have done for hundreds of years. A little bit of time, a little bit of patience, a little bit of soapy water, and I've got low profile tires that I already owned on those 16-inch rims. All I got to do is air them up and chuck them back on there. And I've lowered that whole sawmill trailer, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 inches. Not only that, but 2 of the tires that came with this trailer are actually pretty good, fairly new tires. So I'll chuck them on the marketplace for 75 bucks for the pair, and then I'll recoup a little bit of the money I spent on the trailer. If I can get 50 bucks for the spare axle and then whatever I got from the scrapyard, I'll get pretty close to zero invested in this trailer by the time I'm done, hopefully. Now what we're doing now is we're making C-channel out of that box channel. And I'm going to basically turn what's left of this trailer into a big ladder. And then I'll set the mill on top of that. I'm going to use this chunk of 2x4 as a fence. And I'll use an old cheap skill saw with one of those fibrous cutoff blades to split these in half. And we're going to spend the rest of the afternoon standing here throwing sparks everywhere. Because this process took forever. But one of the things I really wanted to stick to was not buying anything, just recycling what was already here on this trailer. And just like that, 25 minutes later, I've got 2 sections of C-channel, full of sharp burrs, razor edges. And that's what I really need to take care of right now before the dogs walk over it or before I step on it or just grab it without thinking and cut my finger off. I'm going to take this little handheld grinder with a flapper wheel and deburr everything. Now the obvious question is, why didn't I just go buy some C-channel? Well, like I said, I wanted to recycle whatever I could from this mill. And not just to save money, but as an exercise in remanufacturing. Now the carriage that held the axles was like 5 feet long, and I cut a giant chunk out of it and deleted one axle. So now I need to install a new top brace. This carriage system is kind of unique. I don't really think I've seen this on too many other trailers. But we're going to be able to just take some of our scrap metal here and fabricate a new brace for that axle carriage. I don't know if it's got a proper name. Now in the future, I may want to change this trailer 10 more times as I see how it works out and what I'd like different. So for right now, we're just going to bolt this together. We're not going to weld it or do anything fancy. Just a couple grade 8 bolts, and it'll be plenty solid. But you never know. Later on, I may want to delete the carriage entirely, buy a new axle. I really don't know. Chop down the axle that's already there. So there's the finished product. Not bad. Once it's all bolted together, I'm going to chop off all the little sharp corners. Anything that's sticking out, anything that, well, you see, sharp corners. Not only am I going to cut the sharp corners off, when I'm done with that, I'll deburr all of these corners. So there's nothing that's going to snag your pants or rip a hole in the side of your leg when you're pushing the sawmill past it. I got to say, this portaband is such an essential tool in my garage. If it broke tomorrow, I'd buy a new one.
So for the top of these braces that are supporting the cradle that supports the axle, which is kind of a complex system, I may put a set of fenders on top of there just to keep the tops from getting full of mud and junk. But for now, I'm going to clean them out, and I'm just going to hit them with some surface shield metal, keep them from rusting up too bad. Maybe paint them. Maybe I'll paint them. Do I look like a guy who knows what he's doing? I'm just making this up as I go.
On second thought, probably no fenders at all, because if I cut a long log, I'll have to roll it up over top of the tire, which would obviously smash a little chintzy fender. Now I'm going to lay this sawmill out so I can weld in all my braces, all of those C-channels we've cut up out of the box channel. And you know me, an expert welder with about 45 minutes of welding experience. Well, we're just going to give it a go, see how it turns out. One thing I've been told a million times is welding is all about surface prep. So I'm going to make sure all the paint's off, all the mill scale's off. I recently did a review on this Harbor Freight welder, and it surprised me how well it works. Even for a dummy like me that doesn't know squat about welding, I've managed to turn out a pretty good weld with it. Took a little bit of dialing in to kind of understand the process. I've never welded anything in my life up until, I don't know, about a month and a half ago. But I will say this. If you're interested in welding, go buy one of these cheap Harbor Freight welders, and you'll learn more in an hour's worth of scabbing stuff together than you will in a year's worth of watching videos. And really, why go backwards? Now, these are what my welds look like. a complete amateur who doesn't know anything about welding with about 45 minutes worth of experience, you know, I think it's going to be just fine. I was told by some guys that really know what they're doing to crank up the heat, make sure your settings are good for the material you're using, and just give her. And this is what we ended up with.
Now I'm going to see about getting this stupidly heavy pneumatic brake system off the front of this trailer.
Now inside of this unit is basically a brake master cylinder, and there's brake lines and brake fluid, and it's just basically like the brakes of a car.
Oh yeah, that sucker's like 75 pounds, way too much.
Like I said before, this trailer was 3,000 pounds maybe. It is super heavy duty. So I want to drop as much weight as possible. So I'm going to remanufacture this whole tongue unit, get it all tore apart, so I've minimized all of the weight and simplified it too.
I'm not really positive that this thing comes apart the way I think it does. Well, after it's said and done, I think I shaved probably 50 pounds off the front of that. It's not a lot, but it's something.
Now what's left of this tongue is going to slide right over top of the end of the trailer, but I don't need all of it. As a matter of fact, it's probably going to be such a tight fit that all of it is going to make it impossible to get on there, you know, the end of the trailer being painted and rusty and everything else. So I'm going to cut this down to what I think it really needs, about that much-ish. Now this is Surface Shield. You can buy this at any hardware store. It's an undercoating that's lanolin based, basically like boot grease in a spray can to keep your car from rusting. Makes a good lubricant, and it'll keep this joint from rusting too. Now I drive the end of the tongue onto the existing beam at the front of the trailer. Now I'm just going to drill 2 holes and bolt this sucker on. Once I've got my 2 pilot holes, I'm just going to keep stepping up drill bits, because you really can't take a 1/2-inch drill bit and just auger through there. You kind of got to go in increments. Then we'll transfer those marks from one side to the other so the holes line up. Yeah, that's about right.
To bolt this tongue section on, I've got a big recycled 1/2-inch bolt. I'm pretty sure I've got a couple more, but I can't find them. So I definitely want to make sure I got one in there before I just space it out and forget about it.
And by using a bolt from the trailer, I don't have to paint it to match. It's already green and rusty. Back to our friend Surface Shield. This is not a commercial, by the way. But all of these joints where I've cleaned the paint off and made the welds, I'm going to coat those with Surface Shield, at least for now. I may paint them later, but for now it'll keep them from rusting up. Now the sawmill that we're going to put on this trailer is a Harbor Freight LX25. I bought this sawmill brand new from Wood-Mizer 2 years ago. And it's been a thorn in my side ever since, because it's a project I've been meaning to get to. It just keep putting off.
Oh man, sounds like I'm about done for the evening. This is kind of bizarre. This line going all the way across the sky. Today's been a day of really weird looking skies. We've had some pretty iffy weather today, but I don't know, the sky just looks dangerous, looks tornadic.
Later on that evening, there were 2 tornadoes spotted in the adjacent county, and it rained like crazy. So here we are a day later. Now it's nice and bright and sunny. We can start bolting all this stuff together. Like I said, I've had this mill for 2 years, actually a little more than 2 years. And it's been sitting on the pallet that it was delivered on with a tarp over it. And I keep thinking I need to get it put together. I've got to get it together, or why did I buy it in the first place? Fact is, you know, life is kind of just like that. You get other things that you're interested in, other places you'd like to go, and other stuff you want to be doing, and then pretty soon something you were excited about becomes just a burden. But now that I'm halfway through this project, especially now that I'm done with the trailer, I'm getting pretty excited. It's going to be nice to have a mobile sawmill. My Harbor Freight mill is up in the Upper Peninsula, and this one is going to be, it's going to be kind of a family sawmill. My brother has a bunch of wood he'd like to get sawed. Our brother-in-law, Scott, he's got a bunch of wood. I'm sure he'd like to use it. So we'll just pass it around. Boy, the weather today is looking so much better. Look at the sky. It looks like a painting of some dude's backyard with a sawmill in it. Now, there is a whole lot of things that need to be put together on this mill, and I'm not going to bore you with those because we're going to do, of course, a very thorough review of this mill once it's up and running and it's cut some stuff. And at that point, I'll give you guys my impression on it. I'll probably also do a video of the Harbor Freight mill versus the Wood-Mizer mill because, you know, they're both entry-level sawmills. Now, one thing I think is interesting that crosses over any mill that you have, the track on this is actually pretty hard steel. So I'm really have to slow down and drill slowly and use a lot of lubricant. I also cut a whole bunch of sheet metal shims. So if there's high spots and low spots in my welding, which of course there is, I can dial it in.
That looks pretty darn flat.
Only a few things left to go. This is the log clamp. This is actually, it's a clamp that slides along that chunk of pole and will lock your log into position. Needs a little bit of WD on it. Now here's something that's pretty interesting about this particular sawmill. These are called, I don't know what they are, safety catch rails. And it doesn't say in the instructions what the heck they're for. But once you put them on, you kind of understand. It's to keep the head from flying off. Pretty important if you're going to have a mobile mill. It's going to be bouncing down back roads. We're going to put in the log stops. Now, this is one part of the design of this particular mill that I love. These log stops with all the notches in them, they kind of install like the shifter of a car. You have to lift it up, move it over, and then drop it down. It locks in. That's pretty brilliant. I will say that the water tank that I got with this mill and how it mounts is completely different than it is in the instructions. I think they must change these things about every month or so. Updates, quote unquote. Speaking of updates, if you were buying this mill today, it's called the LX50. It's got more bracing to the saw head. I think they only made this thing for about 3 years in this particular way. I'll put that water tube through. I like the water tube design. It goes through a big rubber grommet. Now, once we get the blade installed, I'm going to set the tracking. We'll cover all that in another video. But at that point, the mill will be most of the way set up. I'll have to dial in a few of the adjustment points on the mill to make sure the blade's parallel with the track, make sure that the guides are set correctly.
Well, that's about as far as we're going to take it today, folks. It's coming up in the future. There's a whole lot of wood that we need to saw up with this mill. And of course, we're going to need to review it. And I'll let you guys know what I think of this particular Wood-Mizer sawmill. I hope this video has given you some insight into what's possible as far as refurbishing, repurposing, and remanufacturing an existing trailer to make it something that is going to work for you if you want to put a sawmill on it. Thank you guys so much for watching Bush Radical. My name's Dave Whipple. Be radical, eh? See you soon.